Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to Demand Decoded. I'm Dan Stilgate, Marketing Manager at Blend, and I'm back in the studio today with Phil to discuss our learnings from Inbound 2024. But this isn't going to be your usual Inbound wrap-up, regurgitated type thing, because we're actually going to share our insights from sponsoring the event too. So we'll dive into what we learned from a sponsoring perspective and what we actually learned from having over 500 conversations with B2B marketers as well, and looking at their websites at the same time. Phil, how good was Inbound though?
Yeah, Inbound was fantastic this year. It was a really, really good year for the event. I think organisation, topics, talks, speakers, the audience, everything was on point. So there was a fantastic vibe. One of the best yet, I think. It was a very different year for us. Our first year sponsoring, being present with a stand, having a real focal point for our energy. In previous years, we've just gone as excited attendees, keen to talk to as many people as possible and learn what people are thinking about. But it had a very different focus this year, which was also a reason for it being great and made for an excellent event. There was a real buzz, and that's what Inbound's all about for me, the excitement that it gives people about doing their job better and helping their company grow better, and it did that in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the buzz during the day hit me at night. Definitely, struggled a little bit more this time and needed, some more sleep. Struggled in the evenings.
Yeah, we weren't doing it as hard in the evenings as we would have in previous years. Being on the stand, it really does take it out of you physically. So that was probably all okay. But yeah, it was different in that regard. But it was a great Inbound.
Yeah, one of my highlights actually was meeting a couple of the listeners at Demand Decoded. Came over to the stand. We had a great chat. A picture, really, really great.
Yeah, so fantastic to meet people that we've, been able to reach via this podcast, because it gives us such enjoyment to do it, and it's really, really nice to know that there are people out there listening, and to meet some of them is just fantastic.
Yeah, that was great. Definitely a highlight from my Inbound.
For sure.
Okay, right. Well, let's get into the meat of this episode, and the first thing I actually wanted to cover is talking about our sponsorship at Inbound, because if there's marketers out there that are considering event marketing still, maybe thinking of cutting the budget for event marketing, it would be great to actually cover off why we decided to invest in sponsoring Inbound in the first place.
Yeah.
Do you want to just cover that?
Yeah, I mean, it's events are an interesting strategy for businesses. There are lots of businesses that do them, but there are also as many businesses, I think, that struggle with the ROI, that, wonder whether it's a sound investment. It's a tough decision to make because it's usually pretty outsized compared to other investments you make. But for us, we felt strongly that our target audience was at Inbound. Our target audience would be minded to think about what we offer at Inbound, and that we would be relatively differentiated from the majority of the competition at Inbound. So there were three quite positive, strong reasons to sort of put in the pro column for making that investment. Sizable investment, definitely. So you've definitely got to have you've got to have your pros and cons figured out, and those were all in the pros. So we went there feeling like we were going to be in front of the right people, and having good conversations, and not competing for that sort of share of mind or share of voice there so much. Yeah,
ultimately, we've said it before, probably in numerous episodes, when it comes to B2B marketing and deciding which channels to utilize, understand your audience, go where they are.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what we did with Inbound. We've been to countless events beforehand. We know the type of people that go there. We know what happens at the event. We know other companies that are sponsoring the event. So we knew it was the right audience. We knew there was a gap for us and the type of audience there that could use our services to actually help their business. So yeah, it just all made sense really to invest in.
In addition to know your audience and know where they're going to be, I think there's a really important element which is about attention. And, if you're going to a place where your audience is, but you're going to have to fight for their attention, which is common in a lot of outbound marketing tactics, then you're going to find it harder, I think, to have quality conversations to drive results and ROI, because attention is ultimately the ultimate commodity now.
Yeah.
And if buyers are not minded to think about what you offer, not interested in talking about what it is you do in that place, then you might not have quality conversations and results out of it. So, really important to think about whether you can tap into interests, needs, desires, challenges they already have on their mind at that time, which we felt we could.
Yeah, well, and I suppose now is maybe a good point to actually get into our approach when it came to the event as well.
Yeah.
Because that all comes into how we thought about getting that attention in the event space and, actually attracting people to our booth and doing the right things when they were there.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know we're both really happy and proud of is being able to apply the inbound demand generation model, which is typically a digital thing, and applying it to this in-person event, which has been really cool and successful.
Yeah, I think our approach to inbound was inbound demand generation personified, incarnate.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really awesome reflection to have of it. And to a large extent, that it comes from applying the same revenue-based thinking that we do to all marketing channels, which is, if you think about what it is that makes buyers want to buy from you, what gets them into pipeline, what gets them into the conversation that leads to closed one, then you can approach all things in a very, very, shall we say, sound way. You will pick and choose messages, you will pick and choose tactics, strategies, with the right goals in mind, and that just increases the likelihood that you'll achieve those goals.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at an event in terms of event metrics, how many people to the stand, how many business cards in the fishbowl, how many, et cetera, then you're going to generate KPIs that just don't filter through to the pipeline, and sooner or later people come looking, and your budget's going to get cut. You're not going to get to do those events again, which may not be a bad thing, but largely speaking, marketing teams want to do more. They want to grow. They don't want to be cut back. So approach everything with what do we need out of it?
Yeah.
How are we going to drive that result? And then that just fed into every aspect of it, much like it would our content, our SEO, our paid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it really, really worked well.
Yeah, absolutely. We weren't really bothered about scanning as many badges as possible, which,
the opposite, in fact.
Yeah, we were like, we don't want to scan your badge. We probably can't work with you. Do you want to receive these emails from us afterwards? Probably not, let's face it. So let's not.
Discouraged people that weren't, ICP. Okay, there were a few that crept through because it was, a friendly event where we met a lot of people we know and we like, new and old.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, we weren't going around trying to win the prize for most clicks.
No, because like you said, we were focused on how do we deliver pipeline and revenue off the back of this event. And that comes down to choosing the conversations that you have wisely with the right people that can actually buy from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Not loading up your CRM with emailable contacts that are never, ever going to, engage with your content or do anything with you in business. So it's almost like, we optimized it for pipeline creation for us and for value creation for people visiting our stand, but not in a conversion optimized, approach. The goal was not to get them to fill in a form or to click with us in return for that value. It was to only do that if there was interest in our solutions.
Yeah, and our main value offer was these website reviews that we had on the stand, which went down really, really well. And we had so many engaging conversations with marketers off the back of those. So essentially, on our booth design, we had stopped by for 5 website tips in 5 minutes. It may have extended to 10, 15 minutes in some cases, but it was a really great catch for people walking past. And ultimately, as you just suggested, we led with value. We might not have even scanned that person's badge, to review their website in the first place. But ultimately, we were trying to use our booth space in order to educate the market on potential problems that they could have around their website and just give them advice really on how they solve it to build up trust with us, that if they ever do need help in the future with that, then ultimately we know what we're talking about when it comes to B2B websites, and hopefully we could be a choice that they consider in the future.
The event the way we approached the event anyway was in essence part demand creation, part demand capture. And it's an important point that you have to look at, at a bigger picture when you're investing in something like that. We expect some of the demand to come later, much later potentially, because we will have influenced, we will have created awareness amongst, and we will have hopefully created some trust and preference amongst people who were not ready there and then to be captured, from our perspective, but to show their interest, their intent, declare their intent. But they are coming back to our site now, and they will continue to do so in the future as a result of our presence there. So you've got to look broader than just the timeline of the event. You've got to, try to measure things like self-reported attribution, the source of visits, the source of intent, the source of interest, because it can have a long-lasting impact if it's done well. But I think you can pretty much say that if you're optimizing around getting leads from that event, you're not going to be doing things that necessarily create that long-term value for them, and you might be working against yourself in terms of real results.
Yeah, you mentioned self-reported attribution there, and we've already seen it. People have actually come back to our website from the event and said, I heard about you at Inbound.
There you go.
Essentially. So yeah, it's really taken a holistic view of the event in terms of marketing, and the lifespan of the impact that it can have will often be 12, 18 months and beyond, not just the specific week or day that you're actually at that event.
Yeah, and it's just a proof point for me, because every aspect that I look at, I can see a parallel in our digital approach to inbound demand generation. How we use content, how we distribute it, how we repurpose it, how we look at UX. There are so many parallels between what we did at Inbound and our approach to digital marketing, that it's just proof positive for me that the principles that go into inbound demand generation really work. They really align with how buyers want to buy and the reality of pipeline generation today. So just a massive tick in the box for me that the things that work online work for a reason, and they even work when you take them offline. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've spoken a bit about the content value and education piece at the booth, but actually we applied the same thinking when it came to pipeline acceleration and that meeting booking process, and how we kind of accelerate that. Like, we were trying to ensure that we followed up with people as soon as possible, sometimes even booking those meetings at the booth in order to make sure that the process for all parties, mainly them, is a fluid one.
Yeah, to draw even more parallels with the sort of full inbound demand gen process that we think about, we made it easy, right? We made it easy for people to understand what we offer and act on their interest. We essentially optimized the UX of the of the stand and the meeting booking process for those that wanted it, but we didn't remove all the friction. We've talked about positive friction before, or at least the necessary friction to ensure quality. People still had to fill in a form in order to book a meeting, still had to give us data, and that still deterred some, but that's probably the right thing. So again, all the way through the process, discovery, understanding, interest, conversion, entry to the sales process / pipeline, all inbound demand gen in action.
Yeah, the proof is in the pudding, right? Inbound demand generation can be applied in almost all marketing scenarios.
Yeah, that would appear to be the takeaway. Yeah, I really loved it, and I see more than ever, as we're going to come on to, there's just so much opportunity and potential for businesses.
Yeah, well, let's come on to it now.
When you think like this.
So we obviously spoke to a lot of marketers out there. I mean, like, my throat was absolutely killing at the end of every day, just from the amount of conversations we were having, which were fantastic. Like, I think everyone learned so much. And as a marketer myself, like, just hearing from other marketers about what they're doing is so fascinating. And there were some real key takeaways, weren't there, from conversations that we had and themes that developed.
Yeah, definitely. Conversations are one of the most valuable takeaways from Inbound. They always have been. But we were able to have so many more this year, which was really great. And there were some themes. There were some themes from the event that we'll come on to. But the thing that stood out for me was I consistently heard that marketers are operating largely, statistically, it would appear within the same set of constraints and sort of in the same somewhat misguided ways. As in, if you ask marketers what their contribution to pipeline is, what their link to pipeline generation is, a lot can't answer that question with certainty. A lot of the time we know from data, from analytics, from looking at pipelines, from looking at marketing programs, it's because the link isn't there. But, marketers are misinformed by our industry, by tech platforms and vendors, by a whole host of sources. They're misinformed, they're mis-KPI'd, they're misdirected. To some extent, that's the responsibility of CEOs and the people they report to get them looking at the right place. But the link to the pipeline often isn't there. Now, to give credit where credit's due, a lot of the marketers that I spoke to had some inkling of this. They quickly connected with what I was saying, and they quickly sort of understood the problem, but they were certainly struggling to articulate it themselves, act on it, and make changes to the way they operate. So there's a whole host of challenges going on, but they are prevalent, and the change, is far from done.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it was great to hear that firsthand, because I imagine people listening to this podcast as well are in a space where they might be more advanced in their thinking and following people, listening to, content creators in the marketing space that are, totally revolved around pipeline and revenue and beyond now. Like, they're thinking even beyond that, if that's even possible. So I know myself, if I go onto LinkedIn, I follow people who are either on the same level as me, thinking about the same things, or, beyond that. So actually, I think we can take a bit of comfort as well as marketers, people listening to this, like, we're doing a really good job. And like, those of us that have been able to align ourselves to pipeline, to revenue, focus on the right things and the commercial things when it comes to marketing, like, we are actually a rather small percentage.
We are a minority, not a majority, for sure,
within the marketing space.
Yeah, absolutely. Lead generation is still the spoken or unspoken strategy for most marketers that we met. And that's directed, to some extent. That they are told, asked,
that's the metric.
Measured on it.
That's the metric. Yeah.
What's interesting is that I'm now convinced that anybody who defends lead generation is defending it in the absence of any kind of revenue data thinking or measurability.
Yeah.
Because if you look at where your pipeline comes from, if you look at what buyers do on the path to purchase, you by and large cannot defend lead generation when compared to a demand generation approach to marketing. And so it's in the darkness that the problem lies, because if you don't have visibility, if you don't have knowledge, if you don't have access to the right kinds of information, then you're operating in the dark to an extent, and you're focusing on results that, align to the reality that you understand, but are not producing value for your business, in the form of pipeline, in the form of revenue, and then further down that line in the form of valuations, bonuses, all those other things that matter. So it was really interesting to see so many people resonate really well with the message, but still be yet to make the change, yet to start changing the way they think, as opposed to having done it, which in the community that we're a part of feels like is done and dusted more often.
But like you say, it's far, far from it. And what was quite interesting is then going on to those website reviews that we did for so many people, this then translated into their website directly as well. Those people that were being KPI'd and measured on these low intent leads, their website suffered massively from that as well, because let's say instead of having a clear value proposition on the homepage, they had a slider promoting their latest content downloads, and their buttons were all, for ebooks and things like that, and the website just suffered from it. And in turn, that means the people that actually want to buy from them will struggle to buy from them even more. Their websites just aren't geared up for the actual buyers that will ultimately give them the best return. Don't know if you saw similar, probably.
I saw some good ones. I'll be honest.
There were some good ones.
I saw some good ones because, of course, a few of the people that sought us out were, aware, and I did see some good things. I saw some good elements, but yes, by and large, websites are just not aligned to the creation of the result that we need. They're not considered as a part of the process of creating opportunity because they don't historically generate that many leads, so they don't get invested in, and then they continue to not generate many leads. So yeah, you see some pretty, just unoptimized website user experiences, messages, content, etc. So I saw a fair few of those as well.
Yeah, and actually, I just want to touch on more of the website mistakes and optimizations that we saw, like, from a lot of people, because
Good point.
the trends were there, like, on almost every website that I looked at, apart from maybe 5 to 10 good ones. The number one thing I spotted as soon as I opened up the website was, what do you do?
Yeah, opaque homepage messaging,
Yeah.
which is just so easy to fix but so damaging. That was prevalent and present on a lot. A lot of calls to action that are not mutually beneficial between buyer and seller. Contact us being the sort of least offensive, but many other versions and attempts, like the idea that we can sort of hoodwink someone into being pipeline is, I think, prevalent amongst a lot of marketing teams, and you just can't do it anymore. So just get straight and clear and honest. Navigational mistakes, not so much in terms of presentation. I didn't see too many burger menus on desktop resolution, which is a fairly common pitfall. But in terms of labeling and signposting, plenty of mistakes. What we do, who we are, who you offer, what we is, all the kind of like weird fluffy language, which again is almost kind of trying to like trick people into consuming commercial content. Well, they want to. They're already there to do that. You don't need to like dress it up, really. So those mistakes were prevalent. Did you look at any like content presentation, content experience stuff?
Yeah, some of them were quite good. I did dive into a few blog posts and category pages and things like that. Category pages tended to be okay. Like, you can't really go wrong with, presenting your most recent post. But there were scenarios where you'd go into the individual blog, for example, the sidebar's totally cluttered with recent posts and subscribe boxes that, let's face it, well, and you've proven with recent research as well, right, that nobody uses these things.
Yeah. I mean, if your content is the content of a B2B vendor, no one's subscribing to your blog, at least not your buyers. There is an exception to that rule where if you are truly operating a media brand alongside your B2B content, usually not instead of, then you maybe have an argument for it. But broadly speaking, sidebars on blog content are counterproductive, detrimental, and don't get engaged with. And subscription is not on the path to purchase for most buyers. And I bet, although we might not have had time to look at it, 9 out of 10 of the blogs or content strategies that you looked at probably had next to zero internal linking up to commercial keywords, up to informational pillar pages and so on, which is massive opportunity we see as well.
Yeah, from the SEO standpoint, I did note it on a few pages where you've got product pages that just aren't aligned to commercial keywords, and they're using their own brand and internal names for the actual products, so then they're not going to be found by buyers for those keywords. Did notice that a couple of times. I also had the opportunity on a few websites to go through the conversion process. I was like, do you mind if I just test this out? And they were like, yeah, cool.
Very cool.
So got to see that on a few of them. And I mean, when I say a few, I think it was maybe like 3 to 5, but still, a decent amount of websites to actually test that on, and not one of them had a calendar embed afterwards, and they were all either demo or consultation or talk to sales requests afterwards.
Okay, so you had to wait for an email to be able to act upon.
Yeah, so a couple of them did have an automatic email that came to me to basically say someone will be in touch, but then a few of them also had just a link, a text box, which came up and said, thanks for submitting the form, someone will be in touch shortly. And it's like, wow, you're missing out here.
Room to optimize that. And we've been fairly clear about what we found to be the best approach to that one. There's a point I want to make, which is that, like, websites are a critical part of the go-to-market. The thing that I believe differentiates inbound demand generation, when we talk about inbound demand generation, from demand generation more generally, is that it incorporates the website's role in the creation of pipeline. The demand generation conversation is great. I love it. There's so much insight being shared. There's so much truth being talked about how to use channels, how to use advertising, how to use content, etc., etc., etc. But it often stops short of talking about the role of, the importance of, and the way to optimize the website user experience and buyer journey between those channels and your pipeline. And yet we know from many, many, many experiences it's critical. And it's a huge lever you can pull. It's just a massive lever that you can pull to multiply the effects of your demand generation go to market. But most of the conversation skips it overlooks it. Inbound demand generation for us incorporates it, looks at the whole puzzle. And I think that's really, really valuable and something that is worth listeners checking out, because if you only optimize your channels, then your results will only be as good as your website. But if you optimize your website, you can have incredible impact. So do check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Okay, so obviously we learned a lot from sponsoring Inbound and talking to people, but there were obviously some announcements from HubSpot and...
Were there? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and other things in there. AI rings a bell.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great event, again, on the conference side.
Yeah.
We heard it from many of the attendees. Some of our troupe were able to attend some of the events, and of course we made it to some of the keynotes, and we've watched back what we can. Yeah. There were lots of great talks from lots of great thought leaders, and HubSpot obviously did their usual great job of updating the audience on the latest and greatest thinking from their perspective. And the main topic, there's always a main topic of Inbound. The main topic again this year, like last year, was AI and HubSpot's continued progress in making it a useful and accessible tool for marketers and salespeople and service people, through their platform.
Yeah.
What are you taking away from their AI announcements?
I think just the evolution of it, and there will come a point in time, it might not even be now, the market might not be ready for it, but we all need to wake up as marketers and realize this isn't going away, and the evolution of the tools, whilst might not be perfect yet from a content creation standpoint, are there to be used in our processes.
Yeah.
And we need to be alive to the fact that it's here, it's staying, and it's not going to take our jobs necessarily. We just need to find a way to use it, essentially.
I've got two observations on AI generally, but influenced and informed by HubSpot's announcements. One is that, progress on AI is rapid. Improvements in AI models, in the measurements that we apply to AI are massive, significant, exceeding silicon, exceeding Moore's law or whatever people talk about within transistor chips and so on. The acceleration is huge. What's interesting is, from my perspective, conversely, they only really translate into incremental improvements in AI's ability to write, speak, draw, and create content, right? I don't think we can say that AI's ability to produce content has continued to improve in the massive steps that the underlying technology has. It's more of an incremental, more of a gradual improvement. That it's getting better, but it's not night and day difference to 6 months ago, right? So the progress of AI continues. The pace is steady. It's getting better and better and better, but it isn't a, total replacement for humans, for sure.
Yeah.
Yet, if ever. HubSpot is helping us all to stay at the cutting edge of it. But I just think it's really interesting that there's the advances in the technology, which are regularly, talked about as being huge, translate into, relatively speaking, quite small improvements in the output. AI has for a long time been able to generate pretty good sounding English. It still does that. We still have to review, edit, curate, prompt, etc. to get anything usable out of it. The other point that came to my mind when, hearing and listening to HubSpot about AI and their advancements is that I'd advise all users of AI, or marketers in particular, to assess each tool in terms of whether it moves them toward their objective or further away from their objective. there are AI tools out there that I think move you backward. What they're creating on your behalf is further away from the goal. There are tools that you can use that get you closer to your goal quickly, and that's great. And I encourage you to adopt, test, practice, and use them. But be quick to understand if, in terms of generating your results, the goals that you really want to produce for your organization, if an AI tool is actually moving you further away from it, then ditch it for now. Wait until it's better. Come back in the future. Check it again. But don't use it simply because it's there if it isn't going to accelerate and advance the creation of what you want to produce at the standard you want to produce it.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to AI usage, particularly around like content creation and that kind of thing, there is a scale of effectiveness depending on the business size and maturity. Those businesses that are really mature and operating in the enterprise space probably aren't going to use AI blog generation off the bat without, intensive prompting and that kind of thing to generate their content and be comfortable that that's the output of their brand.
Yep.
Whereas a smaller business operating, with a smaller marketing team on a lean, mean budget and resource might be happy with that, and that could serve their market just as well and represent their brand like in the way that they want. So there is decisions to be made, I think, within businesses and how comfortable they are with the output.
Yep, it's a risk-based approach, as with many things, I think. There was a report teased on LinkedIn yesterday coming from Orbit Media, if I've got the name right, which is looking at marketing behavior and results from blogging specifically. And the report hasn't been released in full yet, so we can't totally interrogate the data and understand what makes it. But they are suggesting that more and more marketers are using AI to blog, but the ones that are using AI are not getting better results.
Yeah.
It's the ones that are not using AI that are getting better results than last year. So I think you be ready to see something going on there. Like you said, it requires intensive prompting, inputs and editing to produce content that performs its job, its role. I think that idea is even more important when you're looking at paid channels. If you are going to pay to put a piece of content, piece of information in front of your audience, then it's even more important that you've considered its suitability, fit for purpose, and whether AI is going to produce something that you can, in good conscience, spend a piece of your budget putting in front of someone as opposed to them discovering it organically, which of course is, over the lifetime of it, much lower cost. I think those are the things that sort of need to drive the decision making around this, alongside risk, reward, maturity, etc. It's a very diverse picture out there. Lots of great tools, lots of potentially great tools in development, and a few that probably need a bit longer.
Yeah, but I do think there is room, even just within HubSpot's tool stack right now, when it comes to AI, for every business to implement some of it.
Most definitely.
Whether it be data enrichment or accelerating sales processes and refining that, and just working behind the scenes.
It would appear that the best single use of AI currently is analysing and processing information that you have, which can help you act with more effect, more intent, more direction. And like you said, HubSpot's AI tools are creeping into the areas of data discovery, data enrichment, data prioritization, etc. Down at the content creation end of things, pipeline creation, it's a productivity tool. It's part of the process as opposed to the solution. But there's a real range starting to appear. And like you said, every business can get some benefit out of those tools. No doubt about it.
Yeah. So obviously AI was mentioned everywhere you went at Inbound. But one thing that I noticed as well, even if it was just because I, didn't manage to get to loads of talks because we were at the stand, but some that I did go to, and even within the titles of talks, GTM as an acronym and the term go to market was used way more than this year than I've seen it used in previous years. And I think that's a shift in thinking from businesses generally and marketers too.
Yeah, I think that's a reflection or an admittance that the world's changing buyer behavior is changing. What works is changing. And I think the lines between things are blurred. Things are even more codependent, interdependent, interconnected than they were previously. Channels, experiences, content, messages, creative, brand, they all support one another, and they form this, this broad set of things that take place between your company and your buyer, the go-to-market.
Yeah.
And so to hear it reflected, I think was really a reflection of that change starting to be understood and appreciated. It was really cool.
And I think as well, just businesses appreciating that functions in the go-to-market engine can't operate in silos anymore.
Yeah,
So instead of referring to things like sales and marketing and products, all these separate entities within the business, they're thinking about go-to-market now, as a unified thing, and how you bring all of these things together, which is really great.
We're all in it together when it comes to sourcing new, retaining, expanding, and growing, business. And it's becoming harder and harder and less worthwhile to try and assign responsibility for that, or attribute the result to any specific thing. Because anytime you do that, you actually start to optimize for the wrong outcomes. You start to turn away from what matters. And so it's really important to think holistically about your go-to-market and how it affects people who haven't heard of you, people who are in pipeline, existing customers, people who are thinking they might churn. All these people can be touched, influenced, and affected by all aspects of your go-to-market.
Yeah.
It was really, really good to hear it. Like you say, referenced much more. I think I heard demand as well, more than in previous years, which I think is a reflection of the fact that buyers will remain anonymous much more of the time, and it isn't as effective as it once was to convert everybody into a lead and email them, i.e. spam them, and score them, as it once was. And if you think about, buyers in a more of a, thoughtful way, you might not convert them into a lead. You might simply focus on what it is that creates demand amongst them and how you capture that demand. That was really good to hear as well.
That's good observation, something that I definitely saw as well. Cool. Right, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh.
I'll cut this pause out. Well, I was going to ask final thoughts from Inbound, because I also wanted to cover a final thought as well. Do you have any final thoughts from Inbound?
Yeah, I mean, Inbound for me is still a very different event, and full credit has to go to the organisers for making it. So the effort that they put into creating a place where people can converse, fun lunch trucks, plenty of space to sit, mingle, meet, chat, loads of representatives from HubSpot, talks that are not all laser focused on one theme. It's an incredible place to go and be inspired, and that is reflected in the sheer quality of even the coincidental conversations you have.
Yeah.
I was outside having lunch one day, getting my favourite lunch option from my favourite food truck, Sopapillas.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
nice.
Pappy's Sopapillas, that's the best thing at Inbound by far. And the gentleman who owns the company commented on my accent, said, "Oh, you're from England, aren't you?" And we had a little chat about that. The person next to me then introduced themselves, started talking to me about their software company, for which I actually had an application. And then he brought over a colleague from the company that had just acquired that company. And we started to have a talk about, how things are going in the industry. And it was a really productive, valuable conversation that happened totally by chance. And that isn't a one-off. It happens again and again and again at Inbound. So that for me is like what the value of Inbound and the quality of Inbound.
Yeah, I'd echo that totally. Like the conversations that you have with other marketers, especially as a marketer as well, which, let's face it, the primary audience of Inbound is that, just surrounding yourself within those people, understanding what's happening in the market is incredibly useful and important. And one takeaway that I'd add from our approach to Inbound is, again, inbound demand generation is such a powerful methodology. And if you have a good methodology when it comes to marketing, it can be applied throughout anything you do. It doesn't have to be digital or just events or, postal type outbound marketing. It can really work in every single thing that you're doing. So make sure your methodology is solid, and you'll reap the rewards in every single way and channel.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, really hope that this has helped people, giving people ideas that they can act on, help people sort of get excited about what they're doing, and that they can take some of this and apply it, because it's really, really worked well for us. And it's really nice to be able to share that with people.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded. Quite a cool one, quite casual. And it's worth saying that if you did want to talk about inbound demand generation or even your website, as we covered in this, obviously, please do head over to blendb2b.com. We've got some good case studies on there to see how we help businesses drive growth through their website and inbound demand generation. So happy to chat in more detail about that anytime. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.